Scientists recently generated human embryos without the use of sperm or an egg, prompting ethical concerns about playing God and altering the natural process of reproduction. This process shares similarities with other artificial reproductive technologies and genetic engineering techniques, but it stands out as it aims to construct a human embryo from scratch, replacing the traditional process. Critics argue that this approach challenges the boundaries of human intervention in reproduction and risks ethical dilemmas. The authors, a philosopher and a theologian, emphasize the importance of addressing these ethical concerns and advocate for legislation to prohibit the creation of such embryos. This article is from American Magazine, published September 18th, 2023. And Jonathan, I was wondering what your take on this was.
There's an interesting development because the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, Israel, as the group who actually performed this, and the SEM, synthetic embryonic model, is what I guess it's called, created will allow the discovery and growth and development of an embryo that is derived from a native stem cell. So this isn't creating life in a sense. It's taking a living stem cell and then turning it into a naive stem cell. In other words, it's not differentiated yet. Stimulating that by certain chemical processes to create different types of cells that are found in an embryo, and then throwing them all in a soup and seeing what comes out. Only 1% of these actually come together as a SEM. But they're able to study this because it behaves just like an embryo. It looks just like an embryo. It could never implant in the uterine wall because of the stage, the way it is. So it's never going to be put into a uterus and develop completely into a human being. It just can't do it. It's impossible. So a lot of the hyperbole around it is really just religious, in my mind, religious nonsense. I do think that we have to be careful with it. And we do have to have some sort of regulation about it, because we don't want this to get into anything like learning how is okay, because knowledge is fine, because basically there's enough countries around the world that if they have the idea, or if we try to do it, they will do it. And so either it's going to come out anyway. But regulation of what you do with these things, if scientists are figuring that out through scientific ethics, then yeah, I can deal with that. But the Catholics don't approve. So they incorrectly assign this modification of the human embryo as a similar thing to CRISPR-Cas9 and gene editing. There's no gene editing involved in this. So that's just hyperbole, which I've come to expect from particularly the Catholic Church when it comes to this sort of thing. They're not playing God, they're playing science. And it shouldn't be left up to the divine, because then nothing would happen. So yeah, that is juvenile, or at best sophomoric in its rhetoric, designed to reinforce their 2,000-year-old immoral code. So, and with that, I would like to pass this to, pardon me.
I'll take over. I'll just take whilst you're slowly doing something the Catholic Church approve of. I'm going to take over, Jonathan.
Phoebe, please do.
I don't understand. I don't understand the disgust. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't get the disgust. I mean, I understand the fear, but I don't get the disgust. And the fear here is that it drives a coach and horses through homophobia and transphobia. This does, because the big argument is, oh, you're going against God's will. You're giving up on procreation. And this kind of science goes, well, sod you. You're talking absolute bullshit. Absolute bollocks, mate. And I may as well go to the Catholic Church, because they can't stand my existence. And every time I get to go to the Catholic Church is a very good thing that I enjoy doing. But the other thing that it does is it shows that the Catholic Church is a very, very fragile organization, because they have this weird thing that the man in the sky is the only person who can create life. And if you don't need a man or a woman, sperm or ova, to create life, then their whole premise, the whole foundation that only God can create life and only God is able to create life becomes laughingstock, becomes absolute detritus, and becomes an absolute joke. Because we're seeing here, as science and as discovery moves forwards, the Catholic Church is getting really scared again. And the Catholic Church enjoys getting really scared, doesn't it, Infidel?
No doubt they do. And I have to say that when I first read this article, I wanted to find the author and, well, the authors, and just let out a stream of vomit loose their direction, because this is laughable. You know, they try to lead their leaders down this path to a conclusion in a way that wouldn't pass muster in middle school. I mean, they admit that initial reactions are not always the best, but their shitty one's actually right this time, so listen to them. And they're so afraid of an embryo without parents. To me, it sounds like what we're doing is we're learning more and more about the human body. I recognize their ethical concerns, and I realize the problems this could bring up. But if someone's going to moralize on the topic, I have to admit, I think I'd better receive it if it didn't come from someone who, you know, the Catholic Church child abuser 101 seems to be their method of operation. Now, it does bemoan, you know, the scientists playing God, and, you know, but I did find that so ironic, because the Pope says that their Pope is, the Church says the Pope is the official representative for God. Talk about a serious projection there. Yeah, I would think that the Catholic Church would be glad that even the remote possibility of more children abusing them does seem to be their thing. Now, I do prefer my ethics outside of the child abusing Catholic rhetoric. And, you know, people have been declaring that the sky's falling as long as science has been around. This isn't exactly something new. I can assure everyone the world is not going to cease. The earth is going to continue turning. Sorry, flat earthers. I think this is just another example of Catholics playing Chicken Little and little more. Now, as far as that goes, I have a lot more to say, but I probably shouldn't. So, Kelley, where are you going with this?
Oh, brave new world. First off, how can anybody play God according to a Christian? Because aren't we all made in God's image? So we're all playing God, right? Isn't everything we do is playing God? I have problems with this idea. It has nothing to do with religion. If you've ever read Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, you'd understand my concerns. I get that these aren't real embryos, but how long until we do have real viable ones? How long before we can gestate without a womb? You know, we just add a little bit of this DNA and we get a bunch of future construction workers, and we add a little bit of this DNA and we make a bunch of college professors. That idea scares me, and it brings a whole new facet to the question of free will.
Why does it scare you?
Because I worry about things like humanity becoming a cookie cutter version of ourselves. When we have 1,000 people who are all the same people, we're not making humans anymore. We're just making puppets.
But you're making out that they're going to be doing X and Y job, but they're just human constructs, those jobs. In the same way that being on this show is a human construct. Why is it that the genetics of science have to abide by and churn out what are human constructs in that fashion? Why shouldn't we, in this case, try to create life without suffering? Why shouldn't we try to create life by eliminating genetic diseases?
I get that. I actually wrote that in my notes, that there's definitely advantages, like getting rid of genetic defects. But you have to wonder how much of human individuality is going to be squashed. That's what my concern is. I relish the fact that we are all different, that humanity is so varied and so vast. And when we start making little, like I said, 1,000 construction workers today and 200 college professors tomorrow, we're going to lose. I think we're going to lose that individuality. At least I worry about that. And that's my ethical concern.
But you say this about, you know, X, Y, Z construction. So what would you be actually doing at a base level? Would you be saying that you're going to be having a social system based around these modifications you make as well? Or are you just going to be exaggerating qualities that the socially constructed way of viewing a construction worker?
Well, that's what they did in the novel Brave New World. They built the whole society based on that, right? And
this isn't that.
Pardon?
But this isn't that. I
know, but it was a warning about what could happen, and that's what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that this is what is going to happen, but it's a warning, and it's something I think we should think about. We're going to make that we're building a society of basically automatons.
But surely that's a wider discussion about the actual society that we live in, and science, as described here, is only the vehicle of society at large. And if society at large is becoming a homogenized clone of itself, surely that's a wider society thing. We shouldn't be trying to stifle what is the one thing that man has always done: strived for discovery.
I'm not saying we shouldn't stop this. I'm not. What I'm saying is that I'm afraid that if we start using this as a way of procreation in the future, so that we can guide human evolution, that to me seems like a bad idea, and like I say, could be squashing individuality.
Well, one thing that I wanted to point out, and Phoebe brought out a really good point, is that a novel can be a good warning of what could happen, but that's not where we are now. And I understand, Kelley, with you understanding that, yes, it could go that way. And with the rise of corporations the way that they are, I could see corporations wanting an easy, low-cost production team. And that is a real danger. But I think that that's more of a danger about corporations and the rise of them and the weakening of governmental control over corporations than it is actually a danger of science. Science doesn't care. And I know you mentioned that, Kelley, that you weren't opposing it. But yes, science is, it's going to do what it does. And sometimes it's going to do things that can be used for good. Sometimes things for bad. I look at this and go, wow, all the diseases and all the things that we could potentially change and eliminate. But truth be told, I really firmly believe that if we had 100 Kelleys, there'd only be one you. And if we only had 100 Phoebes, Jonathans, there would only be one of each and every one of you. Now,
good grief, I'm sure there's a bunch of me.
I'm sure there's no shortage of Christians and atheists. I'm sure there's no shortage of Christians and atheists who would drop to their knees and start praying at the thought of me, 100 of me. So believe me, I get it. Having said that, it is an uncharted territory, but at the same time, I think science always goes out to that edge, and it's our responsibility to figure out how to handle that and how we can best equip ourselves to do that properly. Now, if we're going to do that, well, that remains to be seen. We couldn't end up with a bunch of automatons just following a job is what they were designed to do. But I got to say, I have a stronger belief that people are pretty stubborn, and regardless of what plans people make for them, you grow people and raise them in a lab, they're going to find a way to be an asshole. I promise you.
Now, John, I would have to agree with that. I was just going to say that with this particular thing was actually developed so that they didn't have to use actual embryos and get everybody's panties in a twist, because it's a model that is very similar to an embryo. It can't reproduce. It can't do anything other than show the scientists the developmental stages that we've never been able to see. This is a blind spot in science of how human embryos develop from basically a blastosphere up to a fetal stage. They're only doing it for 14 days right now. They're getting permission, meaning there are regulations about this stuff, to go to 2 months. And that's where it will intersect with what they know already. So that's where we're at. This is just scientific investigation. And I am all for all the scientific investigation that's going to bring us knowledge, as long as nothing sentient is actually harmed in the process. So nothing's sentient is being harmed. A group of cells, you lose more of those from your thumb skin every day than they're even working with. They're working with 180 cells at this point. So it's like, let the scientists do science. Do we need regulation? When it becomes an issue, yes, we do. And if you want to put those controls in place ahead of time, fine. But as Phoebe pointed out, social constructs, that's where we attack this thing from when it becomes an issue. Right now, it's just guys trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm all for that, because if they don't do it, if Israel doesn't do it, then Syria will do it. If Syria doesn't do it, then Russia will do it. If Russia doesn't do it, then France will do it, or Germany will do it. Maybe Germany. But so, it's going to happen. Science is going to happen regardless of what we want to happen. Are we going to eventually genetically modify? Well, CRISPR-Cas9 is kind of showing, yeah, we can do that. We can do that now, but there are laws against it. So, they have cured some diseases.
Here's a question for the rest of the panelists here. Is this a case where I hope this applies to all of us, are all individuals who are pro-science here, should go and embrace the following? It's good to not know the answer. It's good to not know what's going to happen here, because that's where this element of cutting-edge science is. And is it good to go, we don't know what is here, let's go and find out? Or should we sit back in fear and go, we don't know what's going on here, and then stand back and go, well, we don't know, let's never know? Should we be doing that? Which one should we be embracing as a society as a whole?
I would be more afraid of AI than I would this, but yeah.
But I've got to say that if we'd have went with let's stick to what we know, we'd still be living in caves, and we wouldn't be anywhere. The progress is something that we should embrace. And of course, it has its moments where it's going to be uncomfortable and fearful. But the bottom line is sitting there and doing nothing gets us nowhere. We just continue to cycle and pretend we know things, and we let people tell us what's the truth rather than knowing what actually is the truth. But, when it comes down to it, I know I may have said it before, but I prefer to get my ethics from people other than the Catholic Church. So let's count on someone else to decide what's better, because I know I'm not qualified, and I sure as hell know that they're not either. I would rather take Kelley's word first. So
everybody
Kelley?
should just take my word for everything. I'm always right.
Agreed.
I think we should be, exploring more things. You're absolutely right, Phoebe. I don't think we should be fearful of the future and of new knowledge. I just worry about, as Infidel pointed out, when we have corporations who are taking over our government, I just worry about some of the motivations of people who are armed with this technology in the future. And I don't want to say that this is what's going to happen, but it's just one of those concerns that we should think about as we move forward in the future. That's all I'm saying.
So Kelley's argument, let me get this right. So this is why we can't have nice things, because someone might do something bad with it. What I'm trying to say is this is something that could happen. So we need to watch out for it as we move forward with the technology that we're using.
I did mention that it needs to be under judicious regulation.
Yes,
so,
yes.
And that's important. But, all science that has potential to be misused needs to be controlled. But, there's no reason to stop doing it,
Right.
Not Catholic regulation.
No, definitely not Catholic regulation. But for more regulation non-profits, click here.